The word resource conservation, recovery, it offers give you a lot of significant opportunities to the government to reduce the greenhouse gas effects. The local governments can reduce the carbon emissions by implementing their resource conservation. One example would be enough for us to propel a chain effect in the society through which many corporates as well as individual citizens can become a part of this great journey. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 6, Unit 2, second semester BCom, Sustainable Development, where we are going to speak about resource pricing and resource conservation. Now, the word resource itself is of a very great value. So when we are going to talk about the word resource conservation, recovery, it offers give you a lot of significant opportunities to the government to reduce the greenhouse gas effects, while in turn it also helps you to save money. So when we talk about the word resource itself, it has got a lot of strategic meaning behind it. You need to think how you are going to protect a resource, how you need to save a resource, and how the governments typically need to plan so that they are able to follow the footsteps of sustainable development. So that's why I say here, local governments are typically responsible for managing the waste that is generated within their municipalities. Now, this is very, very important. Why? Because whenever we talk about a district, a state, a village, a town, it is up to that local government to understand the problems and perspectives of that area. Now, being at the central government, it is not possible for the Prime Minister every time to come, in fact, and talk about these problems. It is more with the district collectors, the local municipal heads who need to understand the constraints of their locality, take appropriate actions so that they are able to overcome this problem within the given period of time. Followed by, the local governments can reduce the carbon emissions by implementing their resource conservation and recovery practices, which will involve avoiding, delaying, and the decreasing of raw materials. Now, what happens here is that the local government always feels in India that we are powerless. We have not been enabled with the decision-making authority. We've always been left in the lurch. But trust me, when we talk about this local government empowerment, I think it is the need of the hour for the local government to understand, to take up the reins, to take up the matter in the hands and start acting on their own. Now, if you look into the states of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, there are several examples which I would be able to quote where people have gone and created their own self-help groups and they have been able to solve the issues that are concerning the environment there. Now, for example, let's say that a particular district in the southern part of India is subjected to regular floods. It's subjected to regular landslide. The local government doesn't have to wait for the central government to sound an alarm signal there and ask them what happened. Rather, they can go forward, understand where this problem occurs and how we can try to avoid it. Now, you cannot stop the nature from its fury, but you can definitely try to minimize the impact of it. So similarly, now let's say that there are some natural resources that can be conserved, that can be preserved, that can be reduced in terms of consumption. The local government can definitely take a step forward in terms of enlightening the people, telling them very clearly how they need to take it forward, how they need to reduce it, and how they need to use it for the further generations to come. Followed by, now let's just have a look here, which is very, very important for us, the greenhouse gas emissions. Probably over the last 2 decades, we have been speaking about this greenhouse gas effect emissions and the other pollutants that are available. Now, preventing the generation of future waste along with recycling and the composition existing waste, it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions altogether. Now, why is this coming into picture? Greenhouse gases have been threatening the Earth's atmosphere for a very long time. So if we are not going to take care about this emission, automatically what's going to happen is that we are going to go short of the ozone layer. The depletion of ozone layer is going to happen very soon, and the harmful ultraviolet rays will directly reach to the earth, which can cause a severe impact to the human life. So let's not try to get to that situation where we have to make ourselves feel sorry. So instead of that, let's start preventing that greenhouse gas emissions, and let's start making the environment even more cleaner and greener. What we want today, the need of the hour, is that decrease the consumption of fossil fuels used to manufacture, transport and disposition of goods, and switch over to more of electric or green energy systems that can make the environment more livable, more healthy, and improve the quality of life altogether. At the end of the day, we see that carbon dioxide or methane or nitrous oxide, these are the primary gases that are involved in terms of creating or causing the air pollution. But what we want today here is that we also see that somewhere down the lane, we want to reduce this emission. We want to make the environment more cleaner, more greener altogether. So that's why we are trying to switch over today to the electric vehicles. We are trying to go more towards the resources like, when we talk about the solar energy or the fuel cells altogether, or hybrid kind of automotive transport system, which can actually save the nature and make our environment better for tomorrow. Now, moving further, when we talk about the resource conservation and recovery strategies, they also help to reduce the amount of waste that is ultimately landfilled or combusted, which lowers the methane emissions from the landfills and other pollutions from the generators that we have been talking about. Right, so when we were talking about that resource conservation and recovery strategies, we need to see that at any point of time, we have to get back to the resource conservation strategy to a greater extent so that we are able to lower the methane content and we are able to improve the air quality as far as possible. Now, reducing dependence on the virgin materials. And this is very, very important. Why when I use that word virgin materials? We are sincerely and seriously trying to switch over to the concept of reusing, recycling materials, and the local governments really have to play a prominent role in making the people understand about the concept of recycling, rather the usefulness of recycling. Now, let me just quote an example here. Whenever we go to a park or whenever we go to a vacation spot, we see that the place is littered with plastics, paper, or any other kind of waste. Now, that is where exactly what happens is that people start realizing that we have been the primary cause for the destruction of the natural beauty or the environmental surroundings. So what we want here is that this practice of recycling, reducing doesn't have to be only at the vacation spots or at a natural beauty or an area altogether. We want this to be as a habit, as a practice in every city, every nook and corner of the village, so that at the end of the day, you can reduce the dependence on the consumption of the primary materials. We don't want that every time to happen. Can we recycle plastic? The answer is yes. Can we recycle paper? The answer is yes. Can we recycle items that are made out of different kinds of wood? Yes, we can. So the advent of technology that is coming into picture, why are we hesitating ourselves from moving into the areas of recycling, and we are still talking about using of the raw material again and again, which might cause a very big dependence, which might cause a very big degradation altogether on the environment. Now, when we support the economic growth, when we talk about this factor through job creation and development, I feel that the local government can be a primary source of generating jobs for this kind of environment altogether. When people are asking this question, what can I do for my country? What can I do for my town or for my village? And that's exactly where the local government comes into picture. Maintaining the environment, maintaining the surroundings neatly, maintaining the environment quality to the best standard possible can be done by the local youth, for which the local government can invest the time and energy by creating jobs and by employing these youths who can take care of the village. Now, this concept is not just about the factors of monetary aspects, or it is not about the concept of looking towards a job security, but this concept is more about engaging the talent and energy that our youths carry so that they are able to take care of the environment at a better level, and the future generation would look at them as examples. And in the coming era, this would stand as a model for others to follow. In the long run, what will happen is that our environment will continue to exist as pristine as possible, and we would also be able to see that the upcoming generation is benefited because of this activity. Now, according to the TELUS Institute, increasing the national average recycling rate in United States especially is about 34%. It has gone to 75% by 2030, which could create more than 2.3 million to 2.7 jobs altogether, which is very, very important today. So recycling as an industry itself will be able to promote hundreds and thousands of jobs, which is benefited for the nation also, and which is also beneficial in terms of creating an economic growth and development. Now, followed by the local governments can also encourage economic development in their communities by establishing or expanding reuse centers, recycling collections, or by hosting recycling composite processing and facilities altogether. So this is quite but common factor which I would like to say. Why? Because when we talk about this government, when we talk about the scenario altogether, we need to keep in our mind that we are actually trying to build in a scenario, we are trying to build in a system whereby we can see that the government can promote job activities in terms of this organic basis, like recycling, reusing, the stored manufactured industries, or getting into the small scale industries like this, which can promote a lot of job opportunities, which can also bring in community development to a great extent. Next thing that I would always like to talk upon is the reducing of waste component. So when we talk about the local governments who actually, encourage the residents to divert waste from landfills and save their money by spending less on collecting waste, transporting it to the landfills, and paying a fee for a landfill of each ton. Now, that is a very good idea, which I would like to say. Why? Because instead of spending money on transport and on people, probably what you can do is that you can ask the people to fill it on a particular landfill altogether and then cover it up. At the end of the day, that's going to turn out to become a manure. Definitely that will enrich the soil, and it will also enrich the community altogether. Now, if you just look at an example, in 2008, the average US tipping fee, a fee for filling the landfill waste, was approximately $44 per ton. And the Americans have generated 1.28 tons per waste per person. And that's what we have been able to see. So now if you look at that, this average value has gone up to such a great extent that yes, this has been able to give us a lot of money in terms of doing the business. So what we see is that waste management itself has become a very big business, which can actually help us to develop things better. Now, assuming these national average values of annual tipping fees alone for the waste that was generated by a 50,000 residents would cost more than 2.8 million. If the town were to initiate a recycling program with a diversion of about 50%, it would be about 1.4 million tipping fee. So you can just look at it, how much we are able to reduce the cost and how much this is going to really affect in terms of your cost as well as in terms of your savings in the long run for the economy. Now, the leadership factor, which I would always like to say, the local governments have to take the initiative of forming the leadership, giving us the environmental, physical, and societal leadership, adopting the resource conservation, recovery policies altogether, policies that are mandate specific waste reduction, promoting of recycling and composite, or set a minimum recycled content requirements for the product purchase, can reduce collection and disposal. It can also encourage the growth of local recycling, compositing businesses altogether. So somewhere down the lane, I start finding this factor that the local government has to step into leadership, start promoting it, and start taking it forward. So this is the time for that local government to take that initiative, go back, talk to the people, understand it, take the issues in their hand and start working it out so that the local governments can stand as an example for the central government and we can start moving towards a self-sufficient government role altogether. Now, when we talk about this leadership factor, we also need to understand these policies can also help to reduce the environmental and the health impacts, save money, stimulate economic development, which is very much needed, and encourage the residents and the private sector to adopt resource conservation. So one example would be enough for us to propel a chain effect in the society through which many corporates as well as individual citizens can become a part of this great journey. Now, you also need to improve the public health, which is becoming very, very important. So resource conservation and recovery reduction in terms of the water pollution, providing significant human benefits. Yes, that is needed. By reducing the waste and the resource conservation and recovery also reduces the amount of landfill capacity needed in terms of allowing the local government closing up all the existing landfills. All these factors are needed. Why? Because public health also needs to be counted upon. Public health also needs to be given a top priority in terms of the governance. So we can probably start taking those small steps through which we can improve the health of the citizens. At the same time, we can also improve the living conditions of the people. Now, the next thing that we are talking about is the usage of technology. Definitely, yes. When we look here, the most common thing that we have been seeing today is that three kinds of waste. One is the paper, one is the plastic, and another one is the glass. So all these three things are recyclable in nature. So it is mandatory for us that we start practicing the reduce, reuse, and recycle practices so that we are able to effectively manage the waste management and create a better society. Somewhere down the lane, we are not able to convince this. We only feel that by keeping various dustbins like that, people will automatically follow. No, it is not mandatory that people understand it every time. What is more important here is that make the people understand the effective practices. How can they practice this as an act, as a behavior altogether, so that we are able to create a better society to live in? With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the resources that have been shared through this session will be of a great use, both in terms of practical as well as in the daily walk of life. Now, in the next session, we will be talking about some more concepts of the environmental economics, and we would be also showing our ideas and views in terms of the sustainable development projects. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.